Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Deb Coviello, and this is our first conversation, which I'm very excited to have. Welcome, Deb. And in your little name on your Zoom image
hmm
there, you says the drop in CEO. What is that? What is that?
Well,
Much
Ed,
words. What does that mean? I'm
well,
curious.
it was an accident. It really was an accident. Sometimes the craziest things come out of my mouth. And when I said to a podcaster one day, he asked me, he said, Deb, what is it that you do? So, of course, I'm still working on my elevator pitch. And I said, well, I'm like the drop in CEO. I drop into organizations and partner with the C suite leader. We solve some kind of business issue. And while I'm there, there's usually a coaching or leadership development opportunity. And with that, once we get, that sorted out, you pull me out and you drop in a different leader. And after we finished the interview, he says, where did the drop in CEO come from? And I said, I don't know. It just came out of my mouth. But the rest of the story was I must have been reflecting on the depths of my memory way back when I was early mid career. I was in a startup company and we were in trouble. I was the head of quality and they dropped in a CEO. His name is Mike. I've never been able to connect with him since. And he rolled up his sleeves and he sat side by side with myself and the vice president of operations, solved a business issue, but he also provided leadership guidance to us and mentored us. So by the time they pulled him out and dropped in a leadership team that would take us IPO, I had renewed confidence and new skills. And how he made me feel was exactly the same way that I operate. So 6 months later, I said, I got to own this thing, the drop in CEO, for which I have since trademarked it. I have a podcast called The Drop in CEO, and every derivative of what I do is the Drop in CEO brand. So it was an accident.
I love that. I really do because I'm not the drop-in CEO, and that's not who I've been. But I spent 20 years consulting, and I would
Okay.
drop into these organizations because I would talk myself in. I talk them into hiring me, and basically I was saying, well, what's your problem? I would talk about as my son when he was 10 said, Dad talks people into having problems and offers to fix them, and that's what I
Now,
was doing. And um, and what you're doing is exactly what I saw as needed. I wasn't that person, but I saw that that was what was needed. Because so many times the person who was the CEO or the person who was the head, the general manager or the owner, they were not really equipped to be in that role.
yeah, and that is what happens as small organizations grow. One, and I talk about this a little bit, is having the courage to ask for help because, if it's still family owned or maybe second generation, there's a lot of pride there. And I can do this on my own and we'll rally the troops and get this stuff done. But what happens is I find the old playbook doesn't work anymore as something changes, as conditions change, new customer requirements. And again, I'm referring to the manufacturing industry, whereas I grew up, something's changed, a loss of a leader, a recall, something that's starting to cause crisis and chaos in the organization. If they don't, first of all, they have to have the awareness that something's not right, and then the courage to ask for help. For those that don't, they crash and burn. Or you can call the drop-in CEO. I don't take over as the CEO, but it's a mindset. I partner with them, I mind meld with them, and I become whatever it is they need me to be so they can continue to run the business and have peace of mind. They got a partner doing whatever's needed. So
Do you do you like that kind of temporary role of that transitional role that you're playing? Is that something that's really suited to you?
So I'm not a one and done person. I like to continue those relationships, though I'm also not the consultant that's trying to upsell you all the time. But what I found later in my career was I was just really good dropping into crisis situations. The operations organization was crumbling, actually, operational excellence. I had to be dropped in there, build the resources, build the relationships with all my stakeholders, and ultimately start generating some money and some cost savings. We had acquired some entities and we were trying to get them onto the mothership. it could be chaotic. So how can I drop into those things, unify the resources, see what treatment is needed, and get to a stable place of performance? I just had this knack of deep listening and observation to understand what treatment was needed and then pull in some very smart people to help get us through. That just was a knack that I had, and also the ability to communicate the vision. So I was good at it. And then I was outside the organization and found out this was what was needed, either a fractional leader,
Mhm.
specific project. But very often, once we build that trust, I've been brought in for additional roles. Now, as a business owner, it's a roller coaster. You never know where the next gig is coming from, but I
Yeah.
have deep relationships. The value of what I can provide in a very short amount of time is so rewarding, and especially for the customer.
What are the kinds of situations that you found? I'm really asking of patterns that are continuing to be replicated in businesses that would lead them to want to have you come in. Because I'm curious about patterns that are repeated and why are they continuing to be repeated if we recognize them as problematic things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've never had it asked in such a way, but if I had to reflect, I would say, first of all, the types of situations that I'm bringing in, I'll qualify. I would say only about 20 to 40% of the time they bring me in at a place where they're starting to get butterflies in their stomach. And they're saying, I look around the room, I don't have the capability or capacity to do this. It's new, it's different. I need an external view. So that's one of them. Then there's like another 10% that, okay, they're starting to put out fires. They're firefighting, and they just get to a place where they're burnt out, they're maximized. It's almost a Hail Mary. You got to bring somebody in. And then a smaller proportion, about 20%, is they're in crisis. They're losing customers. It's a product recall, a shutdown of a plant. Those are crisis situations where you need to immediately drop somebody in within a very short amount of time, has that understanding and can be effective immediately from a leadership perspective. The trends I'm seeing is probably lack of strategic planning. Because if you
Huh.
plan things out and you not only look at the risks and opportunities, you can be a little bit more proactive. And where you have knowledge gaps, resource gaps, regulatory gaps, whatever, you can start being proactive and bring people in a consultative perspective and then build out those strategies. They don't spend enough time. There's more focus just on the results. Do I get the sales? Do I get the orders out? And not enough strategic planning. So you can at least mitigate some of the risk, bring people or do some prospective interviewing of external resources. So when you need to pull the trigger, that's very typical of these medium-sized companies that have been humming along and then, oh, something happens and then they got to react. So lack of strategic planning and forethought into the future. Medium-sized companies don't do it, big companies do.
Well, that is so true. The first
Okay, whoo-hoo, we're in alignment here.
Yeah, we definitely are. The first big project that I did as a consultant, I was hired to be on a team coming in to work with a hosiery mill,
Okay.
and they were in trouble. And my role was to be the facilitator of this group. So I was going to
Okay.
create the conversation, set the plan, and it was fascinating because I had never been in a manufacturing industry before. And they were operating it was a family run business. The founder and the father of the business, who had started it in 1940, was still coming to the office every day. And they were
Right.
still operating as they were in the 40s. And they had enough business to stay going. But they really only had one client, a large um, uh, department store that bought their socks. And they couldn't see how they were actually working themselves out of business, which is eventually what happened. But it was a fascinating thing because none of the none of the family, except for the production manager, was aware of what was going on because they were so used to doing things the way they'd always done it.
So my thought around that, and again, whoever is watching this or listening to this at some point is there's a lot, I mean, that's the mainstay of our economy is a lot of these small and medium-sized businesses, first and second generation. Um, yeah, why change the recipe? I've got a spaghetti sauce from my father or from my husband's family. Why change? Don't mess with the spaghetti sauce or don't change out my husband's peanut butter. It's going to be World War III. But it's one of those things that I beg leaders to just say, just get an external perspective because sometimes you need to evolve and sometimes people feel a sense of loss if you've got to change. But what I talk about this in my book is the two compass points of past and pride. We do need to acknowledge the past and the culture that has been built because probably that doesn't need to change. And the pride and the intellectual property of what made them stand out and lead the industry. We need to acknowledge that first for the founders, and then say, then what can we do now and start painting a picture of what the future looks like. If we don't do this, if we do some strategic planning, if we don't, this could be a risk, an external risk that we need to think about. What can we take from what already is working well, a trusted brand, but how do we need to evolve it? So I say to anybody out there, if it's working and you say don't fix it, it's not broken, I'd like you to reconsider and say, let's get an external perspective and just see how do we need to evolve so we still stay relevant.
So
Because
is there a framework that you apply to be able to identify what the past looks like?
good question. I don't No, well, for me, it's just interviewing, spending time with people.
Mhm.
Because if you haven't, and even the beauty of podcasting, I've been trying to get into organizations to do internal podcasting. I've done this for some of my
Mhm.
nonprofit organizations, is interview the founders of the company or interview the presidents of the company to maintain their legacy so that future people can have a lineage and a linkage to what was. Um, and talking to people and somehow preserving that intellectual property. The intellectual property and the deep culture, find a way to preserve that so that nothing's lost. But for me, when I go into an organization, I don't just roll up my sleeves and say, okay, here's my cookie cutter approach. Here's how to get more efficiency or build out a training program. I first got to get to see who are they now and what works well. Don't change it. Don't say, I'm going to change everything because then that ruins their world. What is working and what do we need to add on to it? So I no particular formula, just really spending deep time with people before formulating an opinion. And again, that's what consultants do.
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah, I worked with a organization once that had gone through the ending of a executive team's leadership.
Mhm,
And they had made some morally questionable moves.
mhm,
And so they were gone, half of the board was gone. And then the new CEO is there for 4 months and he's not telling them anything about what he wants to do. He's just meeting people, getting to know them. He's and now he hires me to come and write a value statement. And so my first day with the team, which is five administrative level VPs and
mhm.
director level people, and the four officers of the union, of the labor union. And so we're starting, okay, where do we want to go? What is it that you want to say about your company? And they said, well,
Mm.
we don't want to be where we've been for the last 20 years. So, where were you at 20 years ago? We were a family. We knew each
Well,
other.
that,
And we did things together. And then this crew came in and they stopped letting us make decisions. They would make all the decisions. So so the short story is that okay, we finally came up with a value statement. And they took that statement and they hired another firm to come in and create a training program for the middle managers to train the lowest echelon of the company in leadership.
I'm thinking, keep
Within,
going.
and within 2 years, Forbes recognized the company as one of the 100 most trustworthy companies in the nation.
And you wear that badge with a bit of honor too,
Well,
because
it taught me two things. One is if the CEO doesn't build relationships, he or she will not belong with the company. And the second thing is that the people really do understand the company, and there are many of them who are there who love the company and they want the company to succeed. And I have a little phrase. I say there's a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it persists because it resides in the relationships of the people.
Yeah. I reflecting on what you just shared, I have a new recent client and I had a specific mission to assess something and provide a report back. But when I did my SWOT analysis, I said, you have the most amazing culture here. So now I know you've had some churn and you've gotten rid of some of the bad eggs. But when I see the operators interfacing with each other and they got smiles on their face, or when leadership passes by, they make direct eye contact. And then obviously they said, talk freely with Deb. So they told me everything, the good, bad, and the ugly, but freely. I didn't feel any 800-pound gorilla in the room there. I didn't feel the tension. Felt the frustration when things didn't work right, but they were very transparent. I said, you have to maintain this high performing culture and engage, keep the people engaged in whatever you do going forward. So, you can go in and assess a company, but culture is so important because I got another one. Culture's not so great. It's all about the results and heads down. And they're just missing out on big opportunities to really bring people's creativity and be so much bigger than they actually are. So I love what you say about that, the culture.
Well, I think what you just said is the thing which separates the really high performing companies from
Yeah.
the ones that are sustainably high performing, and it's that they recognize that their people have potential that is untapped, and then and that
Oh, another one of my talking points about why can't everybody be a high performer? You bring people into an organization and you don't have a line item, make sure that they're the bottom 10%. Everybody comes in wanting to hopefully do the ability of what that you brought them in for. And again, it has to be a culture of continually providing feedback, engaging with people. What more can we do for you? Because as you develop the people, the potential is amazing. You keep people in their box, that's all you're ever going to get.
so
Yeah.
my I guess the real question I have is what have you seen, particularly over the last 5 years through the COVID
Right.
that
Okay.
that would give us the sense of this is where we are, where vis-a-vis where we were 5, 6 years ago, and how this is how we're maybe in a different place than we were, or maybe we're not in a different place. And if we are in a different place, what is that difference look like?
Had a skewed perspective. I was still busy doing consulting work through COVID. I was, all masked up and going into manufacturing operations. Just something I'm seeing. I don't know if this is anything that would be like in the Wall Street Journal or anything like that, but I noticed coming out of COVID, obviously there were so many supply chain issues. And then again, from a manufacturing
Right.
perspective and hiring freezes. And so obviously they just had to get through that. And it took a couple years for them to eventually get the supply chain steady. Now, what it did teach people is we better have dual sources. We better have contingency plans so that the supply doesn't bring us and our customers to our feet. What I'm finding though is because they're so scared, they're just now starting to come back to the results that they once had in terms of profitability and on time performance and all of that stuff that I still find them very laser focused. We got to maintain the numbers because we don't want to slide back again. And again, to my thought, they are not looking so much forward and okay, let's start bringing in people. What are some new initiatives? Let's get an external perspective in there. They've been kind of holding tight and like, well, maybe if I just like wait a little while, make sure I get my end of my year numbers, and then I'll maybe bring in some consultants because I'm going to be expanding real soon. I mean, obviously they're investing money where they need to have market share and a larger footprint, but I find that generally companies are still just running a little bit scared. And to my point, not doing enough of that risk and opportunity strategic planning. I hope they start coming out of it real quick and start being much more strategic in their work and bring us in, you and me.
Do you think they learned some of um, that behavior, being afraid from the recession of the 2000s? You think that that had an effect upon them in that same way?
Personally, I just haven't seen that connection. I don't know. Nobody's ever said anything like that. I just know this one hit them hard. And they're still making short-sighted decisions. That's all I can respond on that one.
And
What are your thoughts on this?
well, I was about ready to have my most lucrative consulting contract when the recession hit, and they said, "We can't hire
Where was
you.
I? Where was I then? Wait, go on.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to hire you, and we're not going to be able to do this because you're not from within the state." I
Okay.
mean, whatever the excuse is. And then within another 6 weeks, all my clients left me. And my perception was they're they're going to hold out and just kind of wait for things to get better. And I'm not sure that they, I mean, I think for some industries they got better, but not for a lot of them they didn't.
Okay.
I don't think that I think it became a much more complex, much more conflicted environment for a lot of people. And we're
So I'm
still there.
gonna
But it's not like, okay, this is not what we know as normal, but this is actually what normal is today. I mean, you know,
Okay. So let's go there. Talk about this too. So let's wake up, guys, gals. There's always going to be some kind of crisis, and it's going to happen every 5 or 10 years. So this is not new. Something's going to change. One of the people we were joking around. So one of my specialties is root cause analysis. When you actually have a problem, something bad happens. What do you do to like get to the root cause? Why did this happen? Well, you start thinking about what are all the possibilities for this bad thing that happened. He says even aliens coming down should be on your brainstorming session. As crazy as it might be, you need to consider everything. When we shut people down and say this can't happen, and roll the dice. I find this in food safety. What if we have something that could potentially be a food safety issue? We need to invest money. Nah, the chances of that happening are well, a pandemic happened. That happens every so often, even if it's in every 100 years, maybe 50 years. We need to be planning for the uncertainty and the unexpected, even if it has a low occurrence or low possibility of happening. Leaders are short sighted. We need to at least have the conversations. We need to at least have the contingency plans in place or the knowledge resources in place to be able to respond quickly. We have fire drills. Kids used to like duck and cover. We prepared for these things for the inevitable. Why don't leaders do more of that? So, again, now I'm being a little geeked out here in the quality world. ISO 9001, the quality systems management scheme, has gone from how do we reduce defects to how do we ensure customer satisfaction, have a continuous improvement mindset, risk and opportunity planning. We need to do more of that because I have done that within the framework of ISO with a company. And while we can't solve everything at once, we at least have it in place where we review it quarterly and what can we do now? What can we do now? At least be talking about it. A lot of leaders aren't even talking about that. Maybe the CFO is talking about financial risks and opportunities. We need to be doing it across everything from sales, from regulatory safety, et cetera. And I'm off my soapbox.
no, stay up there because I'm
Well,
in
I could keep
agreement.
talking.
I'm in
I'll
agreement.
take a
I'm in
breath
agreement
here.
with because what I see is that um and I may be totally wrong on this. So if I am, just please correct me.
It's
But
a conversation, Ed. There's no
well,
right or wrong answers here.
well, okay, give me your perspective. What
Yeah.
I see is that um people gather around people that they feel like are like themselves, and they're listening to these people, and they're all sending each other a similar message, which creates this kind of um,
Echo chamber.
group think,
Yeah.
which then ratifies or validates whatever decision, and that the person who is the outlier is going to be kind of shunned, excluded, but they may be the ones who actually figure out where the opportunities are, and they're going to be the ones who saying, "Hey, come join me. Come join me." And so that's the way I see it. I think the people who are opportunistic will find the opportunity in the crisis that exists, and those are the people I like interacting with.
Well, of course. I mean, we like people that have the same values. That's how we have clans and communities and family. And maybe we kick some of the family members out that don't quite fit in. We like being with like minded people. It's uncomfortable having diversity of thought, but when we go through the cycle of DE and I, and we do it on physical attributes, I ask the question, what about diversity of thought? Now, in my let's go politics. In my family, I've got the spectrum of all political parties. We used to shun, and I probably was the person that did. I didn't like to talk about politics. Oh my God, we really need to talk about it, just if nothing else, to understand. Now, going back to business, the naysayer. We need to celebrate the naysayer, the doomsday person of all, well, this, no, well, we tried that, and people just see them as a squeaky wheel and let's kind of put them out to pasture. Those are the people you really need to be talking to because maybe they don't have a way to articulate it that it's relevant now. But we need to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, what's your perspective? What have you seen in the past? What were the conditions back there for which that did or didn't work? Let's get the essence out of what you're trying to say. We may not agree with what you said at face value because maybe they don't have good
Right.
communication skills, but let's just understand. Help me to understand why you see that as important. That's what we need to do as leaders is have conversations versus shutting people down. So, yes, seek your own, but just like we're doing here, we're just getting to know each other. You had no idea how I was going to show up, whether we would get along or not. We're having conversation, sharing perspective. We will be richer because of it. So, groupthink is good, but it's also dangerous.
Well, you need someone to keep you in check.
Yeah,
Check
and
the
that's my
check
husband's
the
job. He keeps me in check.
Well, that's good. That's good. But I
Yeah.
think that leaders need that. I think, I mean, I've been doing leadership work for 40 years, and what I observe and I've experienced is that once you become in the role of the senior person, you you're treated differently, and particularly if you were in the group and then you have been elevated above the group, it's a tough role to play because unless you have this degree of magnanimity that you can be the same person and now be in charge as you were when you were one of the group. I mean, that's a tough role to play, but it's possible. But where my point is that um, you really have to be willing to look beyond what is the conventional thought, because conventional thought is usually a lot of it is based on a perception of risk and an avoidance of risk rather than where's the opportunity that we have in this risk.
No, I agree with you. And it's hard. I've had some challenges with this in an organization, being with my people versus saying what needs to be said. And I've had two different things. I've been celebrated for being that person that says something different or provides an outside perspective. I've also been shunned and said, Deb, we love your ideas, but stay within the lines. And as soon as one's creativity is squashed, you got to be careful about that. So, being, and I know you were talking about like elevating to new positions and do you have all the skills, but coming back to your ideas, evaluate if your ideas aren't being celebrated or at least being acknowledged. Think about whether you should be in that situation because there's nothing worse than losing your creativity and your engagement and contributing to society in some productive way.
Yes, I do. So
Go ahead. Yeah.
well, I totally agree with you, and I think we've had very separate paths of experience, and we have concluded a lot of the things very similarly, and which tells me that um, the world is operating in a pretty consistent place across the spectrum. That's what I would say, and that you there are not many surprises out there, really. There you can just you can walk into a place and you can see what's going on pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I love being in that role. I'm a generalist, having put more than 30 years experience in different areas of manufacturing and different industries. I can pretty much walk into most situations with a few questions to understand the process or technology or what are the different customer expectations. I can kind of assimilate and see what is and isn't working. Um, so yeah, that's something that we can do. What I'm finding is, yeah, nothing really changes. We see the same issues. What I'm hoping, though, that is changing is folks like you, folks like me, through the power of podcasting, are now elevating thought leadership and providing that coaching to the C suite leaders. Yes, the conditions might be the same or look a little different every decade or so, but the situations are the same. But what you need now is an external or different perspective. So, one of the perspectives I bring, I'm just going to throw it in here, hand grenade
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
is that, I talk about stop chasing results and start pursuing peace of mind. I think, and I bet you that you, in all of your experience, whether it's personal or in business, you can see a CEO or a team be at a place of peace of mind.
Yes.
They know things are humming. They have confidence that people are going to do the right thing. And you can almost fold your arms and say, okay, I've done, my work is done here. A lot of leaders are still focusing just on results and will get short term results by beating people and doing all kinds of stuff that, yeah, you'll get your results. The stakeholders will say bravo and you get your bonuses, but the people are worn out and it's not sustainable. When we focus on those things about people development, making sure we maintain this rich culture and evolve it going forward, unleashing people's potential and focusing on their development, they're going to bring their A game and ultimately, maybe a little bit slower, you're going to get to a level of performance, but you're going to sustain it. And I know all the great companies that you see, the Fortune 10, whatever, they've got great cultures, they have consistent results, but they've done something right to sustain that position. I need to be imparting more of that. That's what's different to get the mindset to change, to be able to respond differently to these repeat conditions that happen over and over again. So that's what's got to change, though.
What I have found,
Yeah.
and just over the 2 years I've been doing the podcast, is that the importance of conversation has been rising
Yeah.
steadily.
Okay.
And I've had people on the podcast who are professional conversationalists in
Okay.
organizations, and they're teaching organizations how to have open, clear, real conversations, which to me is an extraordinarily exciting development because I saw it in so many places where that was not happening, and I'm sure your experience of seeing that is even more vivid and extensive.
Yeah, I got a story. I wrote about this was um, two-way communication is passe. We need two-way understanding. And so to your point, having conversations, people will engage and be present one-on-one to deeply understand their perspective or understanding or that experience together. I had a situation. My husband, we had new hardwood floors and carpeting put in on our second floor here, and he announced it to everybody. They're coming on this day to do this work. And yes, we had to move things around to get ready. Well, I nor my daughter had any idea what the impact would be like on our daily life as we work both from home. The banging, the sawing, the everything. I had to cancel all my meetings because there was no way I could have the meetings with all of this going on. And we were just grumpy. And my husband, I told you. And I said, but neither she nor I clearly understood the impact of that change on us. So I
Yeah.
said, our communication broke down. So I'm telling organizations now, it's not about two-way communication because I cascaded that initiative and you attended the town hall and said, no, do I have any questions? No, we're good. It's two-way understanding that we need to focus on. Hence, to your point, these deeper conversations that we're having in podcasting, and we should be doing more in organizations.
We should. And part of what I'm trying to do is just present what it looks like to have that kind of conversation where no one is put in a position of threat. Everyone feels safe. Everyone is affirmed for whatever it is they feel that they are contributing to the whole. I mean, all those things. Because ultimately, it's not that we just need to get along. Ultimately, we need to want to work together
Respect.
to achieve the the goals of the organization, but also the goals of each individual, that works there. And and my sense, this is my sense, Deb, is that we're in a transition phase in our society. And the transition is from businesses operating like machines to businesses operating more like an organization or an organism, as an organism, where the interaction of all the parts is essential, and people are not just simply parts that are interchangeable, but together we create something that's living and alive and healthy, and it's more communal, it's more relational. That us, and I've seen that. I saw this. I had this vision of this 25 years ago, and I'm thinking, because I was seeing problems in the organization that I served, and I would say, your organization's broken because you don't see how the way you are organized is influencing the way your people feel about their work. And even saying that, that was just like speaking, Spanish to an alien. They didn't understand what I was talking about. And what I see now is that people want to have conversation, but they also want to be respected. They want to be asked. They want their opinion to be heard. They don't want to be in charge. They don't want to dictate, but they want to feel like I matter.
Yes. Your analogy about an organism really resonates with me. And I appreciate that because I had to bring in acquired entities on into a court, the mothership. And I just knew that we were these separate bubbles and silos of organization. And one of the things that the guy who was working with me on where did I want to go was he took these individual bubbles of knowledge and activity and he just kind of put one big line around the whole thing. And it looked like an amoeba that somewhere in there, all of these bits and pieces became one amorphous organism. So I appreciate you reminding me about that. It's got to be living and changing and anticipate what needs to change. And everybody needs to be lockstep and moving to, everybody has their part, but then it all has to work together. I love that. I've got stories, but I don't want to jeopardize the
I,
conversation.
I'll tell you one more story because
Yeah.
I love this story because of the reaction that I was given. I was asked to do a webinar series for a group within a global corporation,
Mhm.
huge corporation. I get one little piece of it, and I get to
Mhm.
do some webinars on leadership, and and we're doing all this by Zoom, and so between the third and fourth webinar, I said I want to go meet these people. I like personal interaction.
Mhm.
I want to see these people. I mean, we're just voices talking. It's not even Zoom. It's just voices talking. So I go to their headquarters. I go to this division's headquarters, and we have a conversation, and it's really great. I really like these people, and I would like to do more with these people. And the fellow who I knew there, who brought me in, he says, "Let me take you around the building," and he took me into the executive suite of this division of this company, and there was nobody there except for this one woman, and she stood up and and this company's in trouble. This company
Mhm.
is in deep trouble, and and she stands up, very rigid, very formal. She's dressed elegantly, and my friend introduces me as this guy who's doing this webinar series. And I ask her, "So how long have you worked here?" She says, "I'm 48 years old and I've been here since I was 20." She's an executive assistant to a senior vice president. And I said, wow, you must love this company for you to stay here this long. And I said to her, you realize that you're going to outlast all the executives that have worked here at the company because you love this company in a way that they can never love it because they're responsible for its ultimate success. But your success is the love that you have for the company. And that's when I shared my little phrase. What I see is that there's a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the people. And that's what I see in you. And she just, and it sat down in her chair and it's like, finally someone recognizes what we all know here is that this is a great company and it's in trouble and we want to do our very best to get it out of trouble. And, but really love describes what we feel about the place we work.
You liberated her by acknowledging what you felt and what she projected. That must have been a moment for both of you.
Oh, I was shaking. I had chills going. I have chills going up because I'll always remember that because I felt that. Um, how often do you get a chance to have that kind of moment with an employee of a company and you don't know each other? I can't even tell you what her name is. I don't even remember her name. But you see, I think that this is what people who go to work in large companies really want to have that experience. So the experience of belonging to something that's bigger than themselves, that has a great vision and a great opportunity to have an impact in the world. They want that, but oftentimes that it's difficult for them to achieve that.
I know that's the sad part as the companies grow. I know one person who I interviewed, he said one of my biggest fears is that I'm at the point now where I don't know the people's names. I don't know what Christmas gifts I gave them last year, and I'm losing that connectivity. So that should be a top line priority for any CEO or growing company. How do we maintain that culture despite the growth and the siloed divisions? What can transcend all to maintain it? Because without that, the company may change and you may lose what made it great at one time. You lose people too.
Well, there's one other thing I've learned, and I want to share this with you because it
Right.
factors into what we do here. I do
Hmm.
to here with the. I have discovered that, and I've known this for a long time, but I've discovered it in a much more real time that our networking is that we do with one another is really important, and that there's a lot of networking that goes on, which is simply one to one.
Right.
And I'm going to go to an event and I'm going to collect a bunch of business cards and I'm going to write them back and say, hey, let's get together for coffee or let's do something. And I'm finding that doesn't work very well because it's like cold calls and it's like one off. But
Go on.
what really works is introductions. So Brian Byro introduced you to me
Hmm.
and me to you. And so we share something because we also share a friendship with Brian. We have an appreciation for it. So that kind of triangle of networking by introductions is really key. And I'm trying to figure out how to talk about that within organizations because I think that's the sort of thing that can really advance the social cultural life of a corporation or an organization when they say, I know someone over in that other department who I think can help you. Let me introduce you. And it's not, I think I know someone over there. Why don't you call them? No, I want to introduce you to those people because it means that I am banking on some credibility I have with that person, and they will listen to you because of my relationship with them.
I love this conversation because, I'm thinking about my days. I didn't know what networking was. All I knew as I came up in leadership was I needed to have a good alliance with that stakeholder over there to kind of you know, prevent issues and then be a partner with them. So they don't teach that anywhere unless you've seen that. Maybe your parents are part of a social club, you understood what that was. I never learned that. And I will tell you, as a business owner in the last 5, 6 years, I do what the gurus say and get three, go to this networking event and meet three people who will introduce you to three people. And it's a lot of wasted energy. Well, I will tell you, I'm actually got a sales coach right now. One of the things she talked about, um, did I lose you?
No.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Just my mouse moved around, was that you don't sell to people, you sell through people. And I've been now, because I've been podcasting, the value of podcasting. I all of a sudden have this Rolodex in my head, in my system now, that my CRM. It's like, who can I introduce you to? And it's all about paying it forward and helping people out. And you're right. I love a warm referral and I will remember that person. I don't know why they don't teach that. Maybe it's because the greater outcome is we're trying to develop ourselves. We're trying to do good. And a corporation is all about the stakeholders and being service to customers. They don't really invest in as much in personal development. I don't ever remember having warm introductions. They might say during, oh, go talk to that person over here. We're going to institute a mentorship program without an outcome or real purpose or meaning. Just that's something we should do. So I really value what you say in that um, those warm introductions are
Well,
memorable.
I have introduced people to my guest who I think, oh, you need to know so and so because
Yeah.
they were a guest and I know who they am and I'd like to introduce you to them, and so I asked my guest, please introduce me to people you think I should be interviewing on the show because that's the best way to find people. And that network that has grown, the guest list of the Eddie Network is going to be something somebody want to study in 5 years. We're 2 years, almost 2 years. In 5 years, there will be 500 or 600 people who will have been guests on this show who will be linked to other people here. It will be an interesting thing to study to see the actual linkages between people because of what is happening.
What have you found so far? You must have some early data to indicate that for the past 2 years, because of it been doing this, what have you realized or what have others realized by this network?
I am I am overwhelmed by the quality of people that exist in this world because they're being introduced to me, and the people who have introduced really care about these people. I want you to know these people because I really like these people. And I have one guy that was on the first year, the first time he'd ever been on a podcast, and he says, "Oh, this is so exciting." He had more enthusiasm about being on the podcast than anyone I've seen. And I said, so please introduce me to people that you. He introduced me to 10 people, within the next 2 weeks. And a
Well,
lot of them
that
came to the show. So what I want to do is to use this vehicle as a demonstration of that and be able to teach people how to network with one another so that um, and I'm finding that I'm going to have to do that in a particular way on LinkedIn because LinkedIn, there's just people that say, "Oh, I'd like to connect." Well, I don't want to connect with you unless you're going to have someone who's going to recommend you to me. And I'm going to say that to people. Go find
so
someone
that
I know, get to know them, and then you can introduce me yourself to me then, that sort of thing.
So that's what's going to happen when we're done recording and you're done recording today. You and I are going to probably continue this conversation because, like, who do you want to meet? Let me get
Yeah.
back to you.
And and
Yeah,
and what now here and I'll just toss this out, and I know you've got to go here in a minute,
sure.
but we could do this same conversation, and we could bring in CEOs to be a part of it, CEOs who are in transition, and we could have this kind
Oh,
of
I know a bunch.
and we could do a group podcast episode.
Oh, let's brainstorm on that one because,
Yeah.
again, I know CEOs, I know people that should be CEOs. CEOs or C-suite leaders in transition that sometimes need a person to talk to recognize their value. We could do so much with this platform. So let's continue the conversation.
Thank you, Deb, for coming. I know you got to go. I I'm thrilled by knowing you, and I look forward to talking with you some more, spend some more time with you.
And you as well, Ed. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you gain something from this. I hope you will do something about what your situation is. Go talk to someone. Just go ask them questions and then ask them, who do you know that you think I should know? Would you introduce me? Then you may find that your life begins to advance because of people that you're being introduced to that can help you. So I thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network Podcast. Bye bye.